The land stretched like an old scar, sun-bleached and wind-bitten, the kind of place time forgets unless you're standing in it. Dust rose in slow spirals from the hooves of a tired horse, carrying a man with shoulders bowed like a question left too long unanswered. His coat, sun-cracked and stiff, moved like bark on a dying tree. The saddle creaked beneath him, each groan like a whispered memory from the war, or maybe before. The horizon never got closer. It just kept stretching, the way grief does when you stop trying to outrun it. He came to a place the map didn't name, not because it wasn't there, but because it didn't matter. A half-collapsed shack leaned westward, as if bracing itself against something that hadn't come yet. 6 acres of land, fenced with more hope than wire. He bought it with coin left in a canteen pouch. No one cared who he was. That was the deal. He didn't offer a name, and no one asked. He didn't want to fix it, not really. Just sweep the floor, clear the hearth, put up a cot. The goal wasn't comfort, just to stop wandering. The walls would hold in heat, maybe, and the roof might keep the stars off his face. That was enough. The days folded into one another. He'd wake with the sun, eat beans without salt, and stare across the open world like he expected someone to ride through it, but no one came. Only the wind and the sound of coyotes arguing with the moon. His hands, once calloused from gun and rain, now only held silence. It suited him. Or so he told himself. Then one evening, when the sky was the color of a bruise, he saw the wagon. Small, tired wheels dragging through dust like they too had seen too much. No men rode it. Just 4 women, faces shaded, eyes scanning. The earth like they expected it to betray them. One drove, her back straight, hair tied up in a red cloth. The others sat still, quiet, like they had practiced being invisible. They didn't knock. Just circled the abandoned corner of land where an old garden once grew. Claimed it without words, without weapons. That stretch of earth never mattered. To him anyway, no title held in his hand said he owned it. Truth was, he'd let the grass take it long ago. So he watched them make camp, watched them start a fire, set down kettles, lift down bundles. They didn't ask his leave. He didn't offer welcome. Just a nod from the porch, and they nodded back. No law out here, not really. No martial riding fence lines. Paper meant little where the wind stripped paint from boards. People made arrangements, with glances, and backed them up with the quiet thread of staying alive. So they stayed, and he let them. They shared the well. That was the first thing. She, the one who led them, stepped to the bucket, drew water like she'd done it 1,000 times. He saw the muscles in her arms, lean and hard-earned. She didn't smile. Just poured some into a tin cup and passed it to the youngest of the group, then looked over at him. Didn't speak. Just nodded once. Respect, not invitation. In the days that followed, they worked the land without saying much. One dug a trench to drain the garden. Another stacked stones around the cabin to keep snakes out. A third started mending old fabric into blankets. He watched, silently, from his porch, from the shadows. He had questions, sure, but none worth asking yet. Nights carried sound differently. He'd sit on his porch, a chipped mug of coffee in hand, and listen to their murmured songs, soft, lilting things that might have been lullabies or morning prayers. He couldn't tell. One night, the youngest one laughed. Pure, bright, like a bird startled into flight. It echoed against the canyon walls, reaching him in a way nothing had in years. He didn't know what to make of that. The next morning, there was a plate on his porch. Cornbread, rough but warm, a gesture. He didn't eat it right away. Just looked at it like it might bite. Eventually he did. The next day, he left a bundle of dry firewood by their door. They didn't say thank you, but they didn't stop either. Bit by bit, the unspoken grew roots. He patched the chicken coop, fixed a hinge on their barn door, sharpened an axe and left it leaning near their chopping block. They, in turn, swept his porch when he was gone, left tea leaves near his windowsill. Someone stitched a button onto his shirt sleeve and never mentioned it. Kindness passed in quiet, like wind trading secrets with the trees. He started noticing things, how one woman always looked west before bed, as if expecting someone to return. How the eldest walked with a limp, favoring her left knee. How the leader, the one with the red cloth, never touched her left wrist as if it remembered being bound. They didn't carry weapons, but they carried histories. He knew the weight. It sat the same on his chest. Still, he kept his distance. Grief made him wary. Not of them. Of feeling anything again, but time, like spring, creeps in no matter how long the frost has lasted. One evening, as he passed their garden fence, he saw her kneeling in the dirt. Hands deep in the soil, she didn't look up. Just said, real quiet, like she was talking to the earth, "The ground don't care what we've done. Only that we bleed into it." He paused, let the silence sit, then walked on. But those words stayed with him. Something had changed. He started humming again, old songs from before the war. Found himself watching the sun not because it marked another lonely day, but because it marked one more spent near warmth. He couldn't name it yet, not love, not even hope. Just the soft ache of possibility. Sometimes, in the wind, he thought he heard the sound of healing, not fast, not loud, but steady. Like boots on dry earth, walking home. The wind had shifted by late spring, not in any loud or dramatic way, just subtle, a change in how it moved through the tall grass, how it no longer sounded like a sigh but like a hum. The land still carried its scars, broken fence lines, tired soil, the brittle bones of winter not yet fully buried. But now there were signs of tending. The fence stood a little straighter, the porch stayed swept. The chickens laid more regular, no one spoke of it. No one claimed it. But something was being built, piece by small, invisible piece. He fixed the south gate one morning. The wood had warped during a windstorm, sagging on its hinges like it had given up. He braced it with fresh lumber from a tree he'd felled weeks. Back and hammered the nails in with the kind of patience earned only by solitude. When he was done, he left the hammer hanging on a nail and wiped the sweat from his brow. That evening there was a pie on the fence post, still warm. The crust flaked under his knife, apple or maybe quince. He didn't know who made it, and he didn't ask. But he ate every bite. The next day, the youngest of them came up to his barn. She was maybe 16, with a braid tied too tight and eyes too old for her face. In her arms, a lamb, shivering, its legs tucked awkwardly, its breath shallow. She looked up at him and said, like it was fact, "It's too weak to live." He took it gently, showed her how to hold the body closer, tighter, how to press warmth into it without panic. He laid it on straw in a corner stall, wrapped it in burlap, and poured warm milk into a tin dish. She watched everything. The next morning, the lamb still breathed. Wrapped it in burlap, and to a tin dish. She watched everything. The next morning, the lamb still breathed. Not strong, but alive. The girl said nothing, just nodded once, then left a carved wooden figure on his stoop the next day. A lamb. Rough, clumsy, but honest. The woman in the red cloth remained the center of them, like a quiet sun holding small planets. She worked harder than the rest, split wood with the rhythm of a clock, hauled water like a woman who never expected help. She never told the others what to do. They just followed her movements like shadows following light. One morning, a mule broke its tether and bolted down the wash. He chased after it, boots sliding in dust. Before he could corner the animal, she was beside him, silent and fast. She circled wide and stood her ground, arms spread. The mule stopped, not out of fear, but as if it knew her. She moved slowly, hand out, whispered something. Took the lead rope. They walked it back together. He didn't speak. Neither did she. But when they returned to the fence, she handed him the rope with a glance, not of thanks, but of understanding. He started noticing more things. How she flinched at thunder, just slightly, a breath caught and hidden. How her hand lingered on every latch, checking it twice. How she never turned her back when standing near a door. She wasn't afraid of work. She was afraid of something else, something that lived behind her eyes like a storm she kept bracing. But she never looked fragile. Even when tired, even when her hands bled from splinters, she stood like a tree that had bent through wind but never cracked. He watched all of it, not out of curiosity, but reverence. The kind a man feels when standing near something sacred, wounded, and still standing. Nights came softer now. They lit their fire in the hollow near the creek bed, sheltered from wind. Laughter sometimes danced in the flickers. Other times, silence wrapped them close. He didn't mean to listen. But sound travels far in open land. He sat on his porch and let their voices come to him like water trickling under a door. They spoke low, not to hide, but to keep something sacred. One talked of her old life in the East, a house with high windows and a husband with a temper. Another spoke of a preacher who locked his wife in the cellar when she spoke too loud. The third shared how she ran barefoot for 2 days with nothing but a loaf of bread and a bruised eye. Their words weren't full of pain, just facts stated plainly, like stones laid on the earth to mark where something once stood. The woman in the red cloth didn't speak often. But when she did, the others hushed. She said she had a boy once. His name had been gentle, like rain or a bird call. He didn't make it through the winter, 2 years ago now. Fever came fast and cruel. She hadn't cried when she buried him. There was no one left to see if she did. The rancher sat still, hand wrapped around his coffee mug. His own son hadn't seen his 6th year, not from fever, but something darker. War came for them all, but it hit some homes harder. His wife followed soon after, too quiet to keep living. He never buried the grief, just packed it away. Like old letters no one dared burn. In that moment, from his porch, he saw her pain and knew it by name. Knew the shape of it, knew the weight. Different stories, same ache. The fire snapped in the distance, and one of the women began to hum a lullaby. He looked up at the stars. Same sky his son used to point at, same constellations. But the night didn't feel hollow anymore. Just wide. Grief had companions now, and beneath the quiet, something grew, something slow, something good. The rains came like memory, slow at first, then sudden. The kind that don't ask permission, that spill over the land like grief breaking its silence. For days the sky wept and the earth drank deeply. Dust turned to dark mud. The path to town washed out completely, a river where a road once stood. The creek roared with new teeth, biting at its banks, snapping fallen branches like dry bones. The women stayed huddled in their cabin, shutters drawn tight. Smoke curled from their chimney, weak and occasional. No one ventured out. Even the animals. Huddled close to walls and corners, their instincts older than maps, the rancher kept to his side of the hill. Repaired the hearth, fed the livestock, stared out through the warped glass window as lightning cracked across the far ridge like a jagged scar stitched into the sky. The sound that followed wasn't a crash. It was a low, tired groan, as if the heavens were aching from holding back too much for too long. On the 4th night, just after sunset, he heard it, footsteps, soft and soaked. Then a knock, not on the door, but on the edge of the porch beam. He opened it slow. There she stood. Her red cloth was missing. Her braid had unraveled, rain pulling it loose in wild strands across her cheeks. She was wrapped in a thick wool blanket, shoulders trembling not from fear, but from cold. The kind of cold that lives deeper than skin. She didn't ask to come in. She just looked at him, eyes heavy, jaw still set like a soldier's. He didn't ask why. He simply stepped back. She passed into the room, shedding the water with each footstep like a ghost returning to flesh. The fire was low, but it caught her outline, the dip of her shoulders, the rawness around her eyes. She hung the blanket on the hook by the door. Not her coat, not armor, just the weight she didn't want to carry any more. He poured coffee from the kettle, strong, black, bitter, no sugar. No apologies. She took the mug and stood by the flames. Steam rose between them, mingling in the hush. The wind pressed against the cabin like a child testing the strength of a mother's arms. They didn't speak. Not at first. Then, softly, as if peeling a splinter from her own memory, she said, "I never meant to lead." He looked up, not to interrupt, just to say, "I'm here," she went on, slowly, tracing each word with care, like someone walking through a burned-out house and naming what used to be there. I just couldn't leave them behind. Not when I could. Still stand, I thought maybe if I kept going they'd be safe. Her hands shook as she set the mug down. She didn't look at him, but past him, through him. Almost like the past still stood in the doorway behind his shoulder, but I'm tired. Tired of doors that don't lock right. Tired of fires that burn down more than they warm. Tired of waiting for the world to feel safe again. She turned then, finally meeting his eyes. There was no plea there, no request, just truth. Raw and honest. He said nothing, but the way he looked at her, steady, unmoved, soft, was the kindest thing she'd ever known. He didn't move to touch her. Didn't promise protection or forever or any of the things men like to say too quickly. Instead, he added wood to the fire. Then he laid his own bedroll on the floor. She took the cot, wordless. Not because she wanted it more, but because it was the only place she'd ever been offered without being expected to earn it. The night settled around them, like a blanket made of wind and thunder. The rain tapped on the roof in rhythms older. Then language, the fire flickered. Shadows stretched. Neither of them slept. Not truly, but neither of them felt alone. In the quiet between them, in the way her breathing evened out, and his fingers stilled near the edge of the rug. Something. Mended, not healed, not yet, but knit softly, like scar tissue remembering where skin used to be. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't echo. It held. The morning came with a kind of hush, as if the storm had wrung the world clean and left only what mattered. The hills wore mist like a veil. Birds waited in the brush, patient, as if sensing the need to be still. She moved first, rose gently, found the coffee pot and poured what little was left. He stirred from the floor, rubbing the stiffness from his back. She handed him the mug, not with ceremony, but with familiarity. Her hands were steady again, warm, dry. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. Just once. Not a promise, not a confession, just presence. She stayed a while longer that morning, sweeping the hearth, stacking kindling. He worked outside, hammering the loose board on the barn's south wall. Every now and then they crossed paths. No words passed between them, but glances did, light ones. Anchored and weightless at once, she walked the fence line later, scattering lavender seeds with careful fingertips. Not because it would grow quickly or even well, but because something soft needed to be planted. The land had changed, not in color, not in shape, but in feel. It no longer seemed like a place people survived. It felt like somewhere someone might live, and the difference, like love, was quiet but unmistakable. The sun had just begun to lean west when the dust rose on the horizon, slow, steady, the way trouble likes to travel. One horse, lean and mean-looking, carried a man whose eyes were the color of old nails and just as rusted. His skin was burned, raw from too many years on the wrong side of mercy, and his hands twitched like they missed holding something heavy and loaded. He rode straight into the yard like he belonged there. Like the world had never told him no. The rancher stood on his porch, whittling a piece of pine without real focus. He watched the man dismount, watched him stretch his back and roll his neck like a dog shaking off rain. Then came the voice, slithering, thin as barbed wire. "I'm looking for a woman. Name's not for you, but she's got a red cloth, and eyes like she's seen too much. She with you?" The rancher didn't answer. Not yet. From behind the barn she appeared. No red cloth today, just dust on her hands and fire behind her ribs. She stopped 10 steps away, still as stone. He looked at her, grinned crooked. "There she is. Didn't think you'd crawl this far west. Thought you'd be dead or married." She didn't blink. But her hand lowered slowly to where a bent horseshoe nail sat on the edge of the trough, not hidden, but remembered. He took a step forward, eyes flashing mean. "You stole from me." The rancher stepped down from the porch, quiet, not angry. "Just certain. Ain't no one here belongs to anyone." The man narrowed his eyes. "You don't know what she is." The rancher's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low. "I know. She's here, that's enough." A silence stretched so tight it nearly snapped. The man spat on the ground, then turned back to his horse. "This ain't over." He rode off, but not far. That night the wind was sharp, coiled like a warning. Coyotes didn't howl. Even the creek ran quiet. She didn't speak. She didn't need to dot by dusk the next day. 2 more horses came into view, one rider tall, the other slouched and drunk in the saddle, guns on their hips, trouble in their smiles. They laughed too loud as they approached, like boys on the edge of a dare. They stopped just outside the fence, where the world still pretends to play by rules. The first one called out, "We just want to talk. Ain't no harm in talking." But there was harm in it, plain as spit on a Bible. The women were already out front, not hiding, not trembling, just standing. One held a kitchen knife, another a pitchfork. Even the youngest had a wooden spoon clutched like it mattered. The rancher stood beside them. Not in front, not above, beside. He didn't reach for his rifle. Just walked to the fence post, lifted a lantern, and lit it with a single match. Flame caught like breath on a prayer, a signal. The wind carried the light. Minutes passed, then hoofbeats. From behind the ridge, from the dry riverbed, from the farthest corner of the land, they came. A few neighbors, the kind who'd never said more than a nod at the feed store. One brought a shotgun, another just a hammer. But they stood behind the rancher without needing to be asked. The drunk one laughed again, but it rang hollow now. "This, what you got, a lantern and a line of women?" The rancher finally spoke. "It's enough." And it was. The 3 men turned back, shoulders stiff, muttering curses like they were chewing coal. They rode off into the dusk, swallowed by wind and dark. No gunfire. No blood, just a line drawn in dust, and held. Later that night the fire was back in the hearth. Not large, just enough to warm the bones. She sat beside him, hands folded, shoulders relaxed for the first time in memory. They didn't speak of what happened. That part was already buried, already gone. Instead, they talked of planting rows of beans come April, of the beehive starting to hum again behind the barn, of making bread with wild sage once it dries. He looked at her, the way a man looks not at a woman, but at a life he didn't think he'd get another shot at. "I think I came here to rest," he said, voice gravel soft. "But maybe I came here to begin again." She nodded once, and that night they didn't sleep apart. There was no rush, no heat. Just peace, rare and holy. Like sitting by a river that no longer floods. Years pass differently on that kind of land. They don't gallop, they settle. Like fog over morning wheat. Like hands over hands in the hush of evening. The land grew richer, not in gold, but in goodness. Wheat sprouted stronger. Apples hung heavier. Children's laughter, new, bright, full of tomorrows, echoed in the canyons like birds that had never been caged. The women ran a school now. Nothing formal. Just a room with benches, a bell, and books passed down more times than anyone could count. The rancher, he read aloud on Sundays. Psalms sometimes, poetry others. Sometimes, just the newspaper and a voice so calm the kids stopped fidgeting. No one ever asked how it all began. But he told the story anyway, not as his, but as something that happened when the wind got tired of howling and decided to hum instead. He never said her name, but when he said her, the room understood. The story ends where all true love does, not with fire, but with warmth that never leaves. If you've ever thought your time had passed, that life had no more chapters. For you, let this be your reminder. Time. Sometimes love doesn't arrive galloping on horseback. It walks, quietly, gently, and it stays.